In our last episode, we have concluded that a perfect world would be a place where all of reality is objectively validated, and thereby all of knowledge would be attainable, and all of the values reliable. This would mean that we would be able to discern the right thing from the wrong thing without having any contradiction anywhere. A world that is absolutely harmonious, absolutely true, and absolutely real. But as in many cases, we are not capable of understanding what the right thing is from what the wrong thing is. It is evident to us that our perceivable world is not aligned with what it ought to be. This misalignment is what is called in the Judeo-Christian worldview as the fall. The fall, according to Orthodox Christianity, is where humanity chose to reject its creator, thereby causing a rift between he who is objectively real and his creation. As humanity was intended to ascend towards perfection by uniting with God, it opted instead to disobey his primary commandment, thereby falling away from reality itself. For this reason, and out of his love for us, God cursed the very universe we exist in, so that its fallen nature would become an agreeable habitat that would accommodate our fallenness. Part of the judgment of God is that man would have to die. This is in fact an outcome of man's rejection of the absolute reality of God when he disobeyed him. By doing that, man had favored his own reality, which was a relative reality, over God's objective reality. If we study relativity in morality, we would find that values are contradicted by counter-values, both of which cancel each other out. The value which says that abortion is a bad thing is countered by the value which says that abortion is a good thing. In another example, some would say euthanasia is bad, while others would say it is good. Both parties will always find the reasoning to back up their claims, but the reality remains that these contradictory values cannot be both objectively true. But in the relativity of our existence, we will always be plagued by the contradictions between the values in it. This is when talking about relative values. This same principle will apply when reality itself is relative, where the opposite of relative reality is anti-reality, which essentially means that things in our universe tend to cease their existence, or in other words, die, or be destroyed. So essentially, the fact that death itself is real, or anti-real to be more precise, it is a proof that the very reality which we are living in and day out is in fact not an objective reality, but a relative one. This is because death is the contradiction of life, thereby rendering life itself as meaningless. We are bound to accept the bitter reality that our very existence is a relative one. Our relative reality is countered by death. Our relative truth is countered by untruth, and our relative values are countered by anti-values. This is why the Hegelian notion, which I have talked about in part 2 of the series, which states that contradictory values can synthesize meaningfully. This is falsifiable by death itself. Death is an undeniable fact of life and a sure testament of the relativity of our reality. Also, the fact that untruths exist undeniably just as much as death exists proves that truth is merely relative in the material world. So let us summarize a bit on the main points we have reached since the beginning of this series. First of all, objective morality necessarily exists, indicating that objective truth and reality also necessarily exists. We have elaborated on this in the first 2 videos of the series, so I won't go back to it now, so you can go back and watch them later. And please subscribe, as I will keep on making new content, which I hope you will enjoy. So that's number 1, that objective morality necessarily exists. Second of all, the physical world we live in is plagued by the relativity of reality by death, the relativity of truth by untruth, and the relativity of values by anti-values. This misalignment between what is and what ought to be is what is known by the Christians as the fall. This plague of our world has caused us to lose our moral compass, for we are no longer able to tell where our objective reality is, so we would be able to derive our objective morality or oughts from it. Similarly, there is an ought state for a human being his or her state of perfection. A perfect body is perfectly healthy, where all the organs function properly and harmoniously, and all its chemical components are balanced, and so on. Also, a perfect soul is the state where a person's emotional state is effective, the spiritual level is balanced, while the intellect grows in perfect congruence with a person's overall abilities. But we all know that this is a very tall order for any human being to become. There is hardly any person today who can claim perfection of body and soul, for we are all flawed and sinful creatures in our bodies and in our souls. This means that our oughts are misaligned from our natures, whereby the more we fall into the carnality of our existence, into debauchery, gluttony, drugs and alcohol, the lust for sex and money, the need for recognition, our wrath, our worries, our fears, all of these things pull us away from the intended purpose of our existence, which is what we ought to be. The further we move away from our oughts, the more deformed our souls become, and that would also impact our bodies, our health, our inner balance, our peace. This is what sin actually is. Now we can better understand why the Apostle Paul says that the wages of sin is death. Because the more we sin, the more we move away from our intended purpose in life, thereby distorting our bodies and our souls. But does that mean that if a person is sinless, he would become immortal? Well, technically yes, but you need to understand how sin works. You see, human beings are not islands. This means that a sin which someone else commits will also impact you in a way. Let us take, for example, the sin of tax fraud, which is a very rampant sin in my country, by the way. Suppose you desire to be an upright citizen and you want to pay all your dues and taxes to the government without any cheating. You start a company, but soon you begin to notice that your prices are too high in the market and you are losing a lot of business opportunities because of it. You discover that your competitors are able to undercut your prices at every turn because they are keeping two separate books. One which they would present to the government, by which they will show minimal profits, and the other book they will keep for themselves, which helps them figure out what their actual profits are. By the way, this is a very common practice in countries where the governments are highly corrupted. This means that what you end up paying to the government in taxes, they are instead saving, and then they are using it as an advantage to undercut you in the market. So here you are, standing at a junction. Either you fold in with the crowd and start keeping two separate books so that you could have a decent business and start making a normal living, or you could take the road less traveled by, which would entail making much less money, possibly even no money, because selling at the market price has now eaten away practically all of your profits so that you could pay your taxes. Now imagine yourself working day and night and barely managing to scrape a living for yourself. You begin to feel the pressure at home from your bills, from your mortgage, your kids' tuitions, and so on. And then you start to wonder whether being an honest person is really all that worth it. I mean, it's not like you are scamming old ladies out of their money. This is more so out of necessity. I mean, surely God will understand, right? Now, usually in these scenarios, it is not just the people who are corrupt, but the government also, because the relationship between a government and its people is a two-way street. This is why these examples are third world examples. So this is how the plot thickens. Imagine you have goods to import for a client of yours, and he is in desperate need of them for some reason. You get a call from your importing agent who tells you, I know you keep on insisting not to pay any bribe to anyone because of your moral code, but there is this official who is intentionally holding your goods for inspection, and he will not release them unless we pay him his fee. Your agent then tells you, I need to pay him off, or your goods will be stuck for weeks and you're going to have to pay for damages anyway. Now, these scenarios are not wild what ifs. These things happen all the time and in more places than we would care to admit. You might tell me, just pay off the guy and deliver your goods. But the problem is, I cannot show this payment in my books. Can I list in my ledger bribe to a government official and show it to the government? I'd go to jail. Well, probably not go to jail, but I would also have to pay off the tax auditor to let me off. Paying a bribe automatically means that I would need to register it as some kind of other expense, which means that bribing someone, even if it is against your will automatically entail that you would have to cheat on your books because you cannot show it. So even if you are an honest person, a corrupt society will most likely force you into corruption. So as you can see, if you take a misstep only just once, you are sucked into the game. And let me tell you, in our daily life of struggles, we all take shortcuts. We all make mistakes, and we all sometimes even do some really bad things, which we might be a little bit ashamed of. This is the real life amidst rampant sin. Sin is not like a bullet which only kills its perpetrator, but more like a grenade or a bomb which will impact all within its vicinity. Living in a sinful world means that when you sin, you are rewarded, and when you live righteously, you are punished. But bear in mind that the sinful reward is short-lived, for I have rarely seen a company owner with 2 books who can sleep well at night. Just like any other sin, walking down the path of corruption gets you addicted to it. You would begin to seek more and more ways to lie, cheat, and deceive. Living like this is incredibly unhealthy, and it impacts everything from company growth to employee morale to wasted opportunities. Because one bad thing does lead to another and another, and it's very hard to stop this vicious cycle. This does not only apply to corporate fraud, but to any kind of sin. If a man cheats on his wife, he is not only hurting his body and his soul, but also his wife. He will hurt her body by giving her a sexually transmitted disease, and he will hurt her soul once she finds out about his promiscuity. His children will also be hurt, for they will grow up believing that all men are cheats or some other sort of psychological complication which will end up impacting their own families. This is how his sin is like a bomb. If you understand this concept, then you would be better able to understand the Christian notion of the original sin. Among Western Christians, especially the Catholics, the original sin is primarily the inherited guilt of sin. But in Eastern Orthodoxy, we do not believe in any inherited guilt, for each of us is guilty of his own sins, not the sins of others. Nevertheless, we do believe in the ramifications of the original sin of Adam, whereby through this one sin, death has come upon the world and we became mortal. Now you might say, hey, that's not fair. If I'm not guilty of Adam's sin, why do I have to pay for it by dying? The answer to that is very simple. You don't have to die, for you do have the personal choice of being restored and to live forever. Because amidst all this chaos of the world, we know that objective reality is real, which means that God is watching us from above. Would He really stand by and do nothing to save this human race from its utter loss and chaos? As an objective God, He is the cause of creation. Would He leave this universe of ours to keep on spiraling out of control until it goes out of existence? Since God is the cause of creation, it would be safe to assume He is also the cause of our preservation. For if we are to have any hope at all in attaining anything of meaning in this world, it would have to be by Him and with Him. This is where Jesus Christ comes in as the Savior of the world. But is Jesus really necessary, you might say? I mean, can't God simply beam down a book and we'll follow it to the letter and we would all be fine? This is a misconception made by Christians and non-Christians alike when trying to define Christianity. Christianity's job is not to give you a moral code religion. There are a million religions which can do that. You do not need Christianity for that. Christianity's purpose is much higher, for it is the restoration of humanity to its original estate, back to where it was prior to the fall. However, it does not stop there, for God's desire is that we would not remain ignorant of the true knowledge that is in Him. Now, I know that I promised you in the last episode that I will show you proof that Jesus Christ is God, and I'm still good to that promise. But I chose to split this video into two, so you will see that in the next episode, so stay tuned. And please do not forget to subscribe. God bless you.